who is surviving and still here, there will be a wine reception afterwards. Okay, so thanks a lot for staying on. I really look forward to the next presentation by Noemie Debroux. Noemie is a CCIMI fellow and collaborates very strongly with the National Physics Laboratory. And part of her work she will present today, which is a joint segmentation registration model and deformation-informed PCA. I look forward to that.
Thank you very much, Carola, and many thanks to the organizers for inviting me. It's my great pleasure to be here today to talk about my recent research on joint segmentation and registration and deformation-informed PCA. So this is a joint work with John Aston, Fabien Bonardi, Alistair Forbes, Carole Guyader, Marina Romanchikova, and Carola Shanley. So during this talk, I will first introduce the topic and the main problems we will address in this work. Then I will motivate the introduction of our model, and I will also briefly expose the way we will solve our problem. And then I will focus on the second part of this work, which is the deformation-informed PCA, in order to retrieve the main modes of variation inside the population that we study. And then I will show you some numerical simulations on cardiac MRI, and finally I will conclude. So now let me explain what are the main problems we are going to address. So image segmentation aims at partitioning a given image into meaningful constituents, or to delineate the edges of objects inside an image for further analysis and understanding. So it basically tries to mimic the human ability of quickly tracking down and gathering many patterns into meaningful structures. And as suggested by the definition, there are two types of segmentation methods. The first one is the edge-based approach, as we can see on the left here. So the initial contour evolves in order to match the edges of the brain here. And on the right we have an example of the region-based approaches, in which the image has been decomposed into 8 main regions here. Well, this is not an easy task because the definition of a meaningful constituent is ambiguous, and it's also subject to the human interpretation, and therefore different human beings can have different opinions on what should be an object inside an image. So this makes this task very difficult. However, it has many applications, such as object detection, scene parsing, organ reconstruction, tumor detection, and so on. So it's a very useful tool. And then, given two images called template and reference, image registration consists in determining the optimal diffeomorphic transformation phi, such that the deformed template T composed with phi is aligned with the reference. So for images of the same modality, the aim is to correlate both the intensity values and the geometrical structures, whereas for images acquired through different mechanisms, the idea is to align the shapes while keeping the modality of the template. So we have an example here. So this is the reference image, which is a mouse atlas. And in the middle we have the template image, which is the gene expression data of a single individual, and then this is the deformed template we obtain with the registration process. And we can see that the shape has been aligned with the one of the reference, but the modality of the template has been kept, so that we do not lose the information of the template. But it's easier to compare the information with the reference. So it's also a challenging problem because it's under constraint and therefore ill-posed, and it involves nonlinearity and non-convexity. It's also highly dependent on the application, such as shape tracking, multimodality fusion, computer-aided diagnosis, and disease follow-up, atlas generation, and many others. And finally, the last task we are going to look at in this presentation is the atlas generation, or shape averaging one. And it aims at constructing a meaningful statistical representative image and an associated set of coordinated transformations from an ensemble of images. So we have two schemes here trying to represent this idea. So we want to find the best mean representing a set of images, and we also want the deformations from each image to this mean image. So therefore it includes the registration task, and it presents the same challenges, except that in this context the reference image to which all the images should be aligned to is also unknown, so it adds a difficulty. And it has many applications, especially in the medical field, for the characterization of the expected structure and the viability of a population through a statistical analysis, like the principal component analysis, for instance, that I will define later. Or to compare different populations, like healthy versus unhealthy populations. And it's also useful when you want to add some shape a priori in your model. So in this work, what we want to do is that we have a set of initial images here, and we want to have a segmentation of each one of them thanks to the based on the POTS model. And we also want to retrieve a mean segmentation and the deformation between each segmentation to this mean image. And the second step is to conduct a PCA on the deformations. The problem is that it's not in a linear space, so we want to find a good representation in a linear space and then perform the PCA to retrieve the main modes of variations inside our initial population here. So what are the main ideas for joint segmentation and registration models? Well, a structure matching and intensity distribution comparison rule registration, combining both tasks into a single framework, sounds relevant. Indeed, registration can be seen as a prior information to guide segmentation and to overcome the difficulty of weak boundary definition, whereas accurate segmented structures can drive the registration process correctly based on geometrical and topological features. And so we want to put this into the context of shape averaging too. And the difficulty then lies in the construction of such a relevant functional, since the problem is under constraint and involves nonlinearity and non-convexity. So how do we propose to cope with these issues? We first introduce an original geometric dissimilarity measure based on segmentation principles and shape comparisons, allowing for joint segmentation and registration. So we propose to use the POTS model in order to segment each image of the dataset. And then, inspired by this model, we want to use the non-local shape descriptors to match each region of the deformed template to the mean segmentation. And then we add a deformation model in the non-inelasticity framework to impose some regularization on our deformations. So the shapes to be matched are viewed as isotropic materials, that is to say they deform in the same way in each direction. Homogeneous material, which means that the behavior is the same everywhere inside the material. And hyperelastic material that allows large and smooth deformations, and more precisely as Ogden materials. And then we propose to complement this with by adding two original constraints to ensure that the deformations belong to the bi-Lipschitz homomorphism space, so that the topology will be preserved and we will be as close as possible to the initial diffeomorphic transformation that we were looking for. Also, hyperelasticity is a suitable framework when dealing with large and nonlinear deformations, and I like to mention that rubber, field elastomers, and biological tissues are often modeled within this hyperelastic framework. So it sounds relevant to use this setting for this application. And then, based on the observation that the arithmetic mean x of observations xi can be interpreted as the minimizer of the total elastic deformation energy in a system where the average x is connected to hxi by an elastic spring, then we propose to introduce and to define our mean segmentation as the particular deformed configuration that minimizes the total nonlinear energy required to deform each segmentation so that it is aligned with the mean segmentation. And well, of course, the idea of combining those tasks together is not new, and prior related works suggest to treat them jointly. For instance, Drosk and his collaborators proposed to combine the general Mumford-Encke functional and the registration of the unknown edge sets via nonlinear elasticity principles. More recently, Osry, Gu, and Le Guyader combine a weighted total variation term to align the edges of the deformed template with the ones of the reference, and a regularizer based on the modified stored energy function of a Saint-Venant-Kirchhoff material. And then other prior works on joint segmentation, registration, and shape overing exist. And for instance, there's the work of Rumpf and Beers, in which they combine the Ambrosio-Tortorelli phase field approximation of the Mumford-Encke functional and the generation of a mean shape and the stored energy function of an Ogden material. Well, before depicting in depth our model, I would like to introduce some notations. So, omega here is an open-bounded and connected subset of R2 with boundary of class C1, which basically represents the image domain. Then Ti is the ith template image for I equals 1 to m, where m is the total number of images that we have. And for theoretical purposes, each Ti is assumed to be compactly supported on omega, so that Ti composed with phi I is always well defined. And Ti are also assumed to be Lipschitz continuous, so that the chain rule for the composition can be applied. Then phi I is the sole deformation from the template Ti to the mean segmentation. And theta Ti is corresponds to the segmentation of the template Ti, and theta R represents the mean segmented atlas, which is also an unknown of our problem. And Ui here is the associated displacement to the deformation phi I. So now let me focus on the construction of our model, and I will begin with the nonlinear elasticity-based regularizer. So as I have mentioned previously, in this model we consider the shapes to be matched as Ogden materials. So the proposed regularizer on each phi is based on the coupling of the stored energy function of an Ogden material and on a term controlling that the Jacobian and the inverse Jacobian remain small, so that the deformation map does not exhibit contractions or expansions that are too large and remains a bi-Lipschitz homeomorphism in order to preserve the topology. So to sum up, the regularization can be written like this, with W being the sum of this term, the stored energy function of an Ogden material, and those two terms, and forcing the deformation to be a bi-Lipschitz homeomorphism. And now I'm going to introduce properly the Potts model for segmentation. So in the discrete setting, it's this equation where f is the observed image, and it involves the L0 norm of the gradient of u. This L0 norm on the gradient basically counts the number of pixels where the gradient is not null. So it basically counts the number of pixels that corresponds to an edge. And in the continuous setting, we have this counterpart in which the total variation appears. And for a characteristic function, the total variation measures the length of the perimeter of the set. And so what does this model do? It approximates in the L2 sense an image by n regions whose characteristic functions are respectively theta L with constant intensity CL, minimizing the length of the overall edges. So at the end we get a piecewise constant approximation of our initial image. And so this is a region-based approach for segmentation in which an object is seen as a homogeneous region with close intensity values. And we now need a fidelity term to drive our registration process. And so based on the POTS model, we propose this dissimilarity measure in the discrete setting, and this is the continuous counterpart. So it aims at minimizing the length of the contours defined by the difference between the deformed segmentation of the template and the mean segmentation. So it tries to align the edges of each homogeneous region of the deformed template with the ones of the reference. And then by combining all this, we obtain this functional to be minimized, which is composed of this fidelity term for the registration, the regularization for each deformation, the segmentation term for each template, and this term will ensure that our mean representation is actually a piecewise constant segmentation. And one can prove that this problem admits minimizers in suitable functional spaces, but I won't go into the details here. And the numerical difficulties to solve this problem come from the fact that there's a nonlinearity in the Jacobian of phi I. There's also the presence of the inverse Jacobian and the composition theta Ti composed with phi I in the distance measure criterion. So how do we propose to lift these drawbacks? Well, inspired by the work of Negron-Marrero, we propose to introduce auxiliary variables Vi simulating the Jacobian of phi I, so that the nonlinearity is moved to this new variable. Wi will simulate the inverse Jacobian, and theta tilde Ti will simulate theta r minus theta Ti composed with phi I. And then we use an LP penalization method to ensure their closeness to the initial variable. And also one can prove that if the parameter in front of this penalization goes to infinity, then we come back to our initial problem. So it's worth considering this method. And then we use an alternating optimization scheme in which we solve the subproblem with respect to each unknown alternatively. And this is the results we obtain with this algorithm. So here are the template images that we consider, which are cine cardiac MRIs. So this is when the heart is very dilated, and this is when the heart is more contracted. And the second column represents the segmentation of each template, so we can see that it's a good piecewise constant approximation of this image. And then we have the deformed segmentation, so we can see that they are very close to each other, and also very close to the mean segmentation that we obtain here, which means that our algorithm works quite well in practice. And also this mean sounds reasonable since it's close to the third image, which is some kind of an intermediate state between this one and this one. And also the fourth column is the deformed template, and here again we can see that they are very close to each other. So now let me focus on the second objective of this work, and first I would like to define the principal component analysis, even though I'm pretty sure almost everyone here knows what it is. So it's a statistical procedure that uses an orthogonal transformation to convert a set of observations of possibly correlated variables into a set of values of linearly uncorrelated variables called principal components. So this transformation is defined in such a way that the first principal component has the largest value, the largest possible variance, and each succeeding component in turn has the highest variance possible under the constraint that it is orthogonal to the preceding components. And so the resulting vectors, which are a linear combination of the variables, are an uncorrelated orthogonal basis set. So in order to perform this kind of analysis, we need the variables to live in a linear space. And so now our objective is to conduct a statistical analysis of the dataset through principal component analysis on the deformations in order to retrieve the main modes of variation inside the population. But the difficulty is that our deformation maps do not live in a linear space. So the challenge here is to find a good representation of our deformations in a linear space equipped with a scalar product. And we actually propose three methods to do so. But before describing them, I would like to introduce the Cauchy stress tensor, which is defined by this formula here. And in an equilibrium position, we have those equalities. So this tensor actually relates the forces applied to the material with the corresponding deformation. And it's very useful since we have this observation. So the classical covariance tensor can be identified with the covariance tensor of the displacements obtained by adding a small fraction of the ith spring force. So based on this observation, we propose to minimize this functional here, where we add a small fraction of the forces coming from the deformation phi I. The problem is that the solution of this minimization problem is still in a nonlinear space. So we then apply a Taylor development to W and get back to the linear elasticity equation, which is this one, where epsilon of vi is the symmetric gradient. And then we perform the PCA on the obtained displacements vi. The problem is that we may lose the initial nonlinear nature of the deformation with this method. So in order to overcome this drawback, we then propose a second method, which is we want to perform the PCA on the Cauchy stress tensor directly after noticing that they belong to the linear space L2. And then we solve this problem to get back to the deformations by assuming that the correspondence between the forces and the displacements is a one-to-one, which is true at least locally. And actually this last term here has been added in order to make sure that Vi is Lipschitz continuous and that the chain rule for the composition here can be applied. And the third method we are looking at is based on an interpolation approximation problem. And the idea is to find the best approximation of our deformation fields belonging to H3 such that the linear deformation tensor is equal to the complete initial deformation tensor. The drawback of this method is that the interpolation is too constrained and might create some memory storage issues. So we propose to relax this as an approximation problem by solving this problem. And actually we want to approximate both the deformations and the deformation tensors. So now let me show you some numerical simulations. So this is the first mode of variation we obtained with our first method. So we can see that we retrieve this contraction expansion of movement of the heart, which means that this approach works quite well. And this is the results we obtained with the second method. So here again we retrieve this contraction expansion movement of the heart. And this is the results we obtained with the third model. And now I'm going to focus on the comparison between the third model and the second model. So I believe that the third model performs actually a little bit better in this area, because we can see that this part is quite straight compared to this one, and in practice actually this should be really straight. So but this is just a proof of concept example that will lead to further clinical applications and validation. So to summarize, in this talk I've presented a joint registration, segmentation and atlas generation model based on the Potts model for segmentation and the nonlinear elasticity principles. I've also presented 3 different methods to approximate the obtained deformations in a linear space to perform the principal component analysis and to retrieve the main modes of variations inside the studied population. And I've shown you some preliminary numerical simulations on cardiac MRIs. Well, here are the references I mentioned during this talk. I thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any question.
Thanks a lot, Noemie. Questions? Strange if I ask questions because I'm a collaborator, but anyway. So you didn't say a lot about computational times.
Yeah.
So it's a heavily non-linear model that you have developed, right?
Yeah.
How does this reflect in the computational time?
Yeah, it's quite long. For these 5 images, which are 150 by 150, it takes about 20-25 minutes for the first step. I mean, then the PCA is quite fast. Yeah.
And how do you choose all these parameters that you have in the model?
For the timing, it's by hand. Yeah. I mean, we have some insight of what each parameter should, how it should influence the results.
Yeah.
But
that's the good thing about modeling each of the components, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
What they're doing.
Yeah.
Rob?
So you have this theta r, which is the mean segmentation. How much difference does it make? So it's somehow the mean of the images you input. What would happen if you just replaced it with some picture of someone else's heart that you'd manually segmented anyway? So not include it as...
you mean if it's not an unknown of the model?
Yes. So
yes, so since we use an alternative minimization scheme, we just remove one step of this alternation, and it should work too.
Do you think the results will be sensitive to it?
Yes, I think so, because then you really want your deform template to be aligned with this particular reference, so it will have an influence on your outputs in this sense. Yeah.
If there are no more questions, let's thank Noemie again.